My son and I started this business about nearly 20 years ago now, and he's our CEO these days. Welcome aboard. And I've had jobs through the organisation over the years, but at the present time I'm corporate secretary, which means that in effect I'm the signatory for the corporations and the various companies we have. I think at this point we probably have about half a dozen different companies in different countries. So that's my particular role, and my son is the CEO. So
the computer's just behind you, so you sort of need to point it in that direction.
Okay. I thought I'd start off telling you, giving you a size of what Ephox is about, because unless you understand the size of it, what I'm going to talk about probably would make a lot more sense. Okay. So we make component software. That's our speciality. We make components, and the component that we make is a text editor. Can I show what a text editor looks like? Okay, this is from our website, and it gives you a good example of exactly what a text editor is. So if you're putting any information into a website or an intranet or whatever it is, you'll need something like this to put the data in, to put the text in. And of course, you need to have it that it can do a lot of things, like put links in, photographs, video, all sorts of things. So that's essentially what we do, and we've built a range of products around that, which is a pretty basic part of the internet. So we go back to the statistics. So we currently believe, in terms of what we know, is that we're used on about 40% of the world's websites. So that's actually a pretty staggering number of websites. I think down here we say it's 100 million. We know that because we're the engine behind WordPress. Anybody's ever used WordPress? We're the engine behind WordPress. And our current belief is that there are about 200 million users a day using our software. So that would probably give you, if you're using anything to put anything into the internet, even if it's an ad or whatever, it's going to be, you're going to be one of those people. And you will never have heard of us, right? You will never have heard of us. So I guess those are users, in a sense. They're the people who are using them. But we also have a very big cadre of developers. So we've got about 105 million developers on our books, and they get emails and all that sort of stuff about latest products and all those sorts of things. And we rely on them to forward our product into the development that they're doing. So, and just to summarise, we've had about 18 years of profitable growth up to this particular point in time, and we have about 30 to 40 staff. Our staff's gone up a bit. It's been over the 50 mark. It's come back a bit, and we find that really, as we've grown, that we don't need a lot of staff. Our development centre is pretty focused on what it does, and our staff is probably going to hang around that level probably pretty well forever, would be my guess. So some of our customers, and they're probably more American customers than Australian ones, but Blackboard is the school system that there will be tens of thousands of students across the United States using Blackboard to input their assignments and teachers to do their material. SurveyMonkey, you've probably heard about, Constant Contact, Everbright, if you're looking for an event, Evernote, of course, and IBM. IBM have been with us for a long time now, and we are the backbone to IBM systems in terms of their entry of text material into whatever systems they've got. I said before that in terms of the statistics, we believe that about 70% of the textual content of the internet is produced using our software. So that's a fair old quantity, and we're very proud of that. LinkedIn, of course, Microsoft, WordPress, Zendesk, OpenText. And in fact, there's quite a number that I can't tell you because we've got some sort of embargo on us telling people about who they are. But one of the biggest users, probably in the United States, is the US government. We do a lot of the US government websites, and in Australia, South Australia, and Victoria, we do a lot. But I don't know of any in New South Wales. Perhaps one or two. I don't know. Interesting story. Why not New South Wales? Anyway, we are. The way we market is probably is a little bit about how I talked about this. So let me just run through what we are. Produce web content and management software. We're focused on developers, so we're not a consumer product in any sense of the imagination. We're focusing on a particular cadre of people called developers, and our products include things that are related to that text editor that I showed you before. We had Edit Live, which is our legacy product, if you like. That was a Java-based product, which is being phased out. Textbox.io is a JavaScript product. TinyMCE and TinyMCE Cloud are again editors. If you've had anything to do with programming, you've probably heard about TinyMCE. Has anybody heard about TinyMCE? No?
I'm a developer.
Well, it's the one to go to if you want any form of editor. And these things are about uploading pictures and so on, and managing your website and so on. But essentially, they're all built around that need to put textual material into our website. Now, all of these products are available in open source. I need to get back to that because that's a really critical business model we have. We're an open source company. We produce all of our product and we give it away. We give away about 95% of what we produce for free. Right? That people say, oh, how are you going to make money out of that? I'm going to talk to you about that in a moment. Okay? We've got a headquarters in Palo Alto in California, and we have a development centre in Brisbane, which has about 30 people, I guess, and another one in a place called Umeå, north of Sweden. We've got a development centre there. We also have people located in Austin in Texas and Denver in Colorado. And of course I'm here in Capes Beach, and we're quite happy to accommodate people who are working in various different locations. Get the right one. There we go. So, what's the business model? I guess that's what people are interested in. What is our business model? And essentially, all of our business is targeted through online sales. The whole business is built around a digital presence. So we have our marketing people are particularly good at this. They know exactly who's coming to our websites. They know how to get them there. They keep the most incredible arrangement, collection of statistics on it. They know how to use Google to the nth degree, and they're targeting particular people. So when people hit out those 1.5 million developers that we've got out there, when they start to interact with us, we know who they are and we can go out and chase them. And they might not necessarily buy something this particular time, but we know that they're using our software and so on, and it can become very helpful in the sales process. Open source is, of course, a pretty tough way to go, giving away all of your intellectual property. There are various different agreements which we sell our product, or which we give away a product under. LGPL and AGPL can be used for commercial purposes, but one of the key parts about open source software is that you can't modify the software. So if the software is put into somebody else's application and you modify it, you've got to give it back to the open source community. Now that's really a big thing for a lot of organisations. They don't want to put their time into modifying a bit of open source software and having an obligation to put it back into all their IP back into the ether, if you like. The interesting thing is we've almost never had that happen. It's very, very rare indeed. They much prefer to come to us and say, we'll buy a commercial license. And that's the incentive, of course, to get people on subscription. We have a subscription model. So there's an annual fees. We'll do it in a month if you want. And of course that builds up over the years. So you've actually got a really big portfolio of companies, and some of our companies, or people we tend to buy to at the big end of town, government and those sort of people, not to small end businesses. We're selling to people who really can afford the big end of our systems. Once we've got them, of course, then we can start upselling them. And it's amazing how much effort we put into that and how much benefit we get out of upselling to people who are already there. We know there are these 1.5 million people. We've just got to upsell them. And we might in fact be selling them to a commercial product. And that's the difference. So we've got a number of ways we can start to make money out of the fact that we've given away all of this software for free. So if they want it, they can pay for it. If they get a license, commercial license for the software, they'll get technical support with it. And that can be pretty critical for a lot of people. We do things like spell checking, which can be added into it. That's a normal part of life, I guess, but somebody's got to pay for it. We actually do 96 different languages. So, this is pretty big around the world in different things. Not every one of them has a spell checker, mind you, but the vast majority do. Accessibility checker. One of the things that's happened for government, particularly around the world, I'm not quite sure how far it's gone in Australia, is that everything that's presented on a website has to be accessible to everybody. It has to be able to be blown up in size. It has to be able to be read verbally. It has to it has to be in a particular style so people can read it. You can't use certain fonts. So we have a system that you can buy that would run that through. So for an organisation, and one of the ones that I do know who use it is the US Department of Health and Community Services, whatever they call themselves. And they are very keen to make sure that every one of their websites is completely compliant with the US requirement, which is called 502. Power pasting is another big area where people want to be able to take something from some other document and put it onto the website. Word would be a very good example. You type something up in Word and just want to go copy and paste. Now it's pretty technical to do that. So if they want to do that, they've got to pay for it. If they don't want to do that, and they've got the open source version, they're going to have to retype it. A bit of a hassle. In-context editing is a developing area that's related very much to artificial intelligence. We have a relationship with IBM in relation to that, where we've connected to their big blue computer. What's the one that played chess? Their computer that does all of the massive calculations. So, in-context checking is about where you would look at the grammar of a paragraph or a document. Is the grammar okay? But it's a lot more than that. It's about sexist language. It's about style. So if you're writing a letter to someone and you want it to be a particular style, then the in-context checking will say to you, we think this is a bit rough, or this is not going to be academic enough, or it's not going to meet a simple audience that you might have. So you can set that. I mean, that's pretty important if you're into, say, schools, universities and so on. So that's part of that. And we have a system for link checking. So if you go to a major website of an organisation, how many times have you found the links don't work? It happens to me all the time. And I went to a government website yesterday and none of the links worked. Now, we wouldn't, if you're using our software, we wouldn't allow it to be published without that being verified. So again, that's pretty important. And media embedding, again, is particularly important. But one of the things about our software is that we give the users, the developers, the guarantee that it can be used on any machine in any form. Right? So a fairly good example is the New York Times has been one of our users. They would produce the New York Times, and it could be printed, it could be on a tablet, it could be on an iPhone, it could be on a Google phone, it can be anywhere. But it has to be presented exactly the way they want it. So that's if you like, the guarantee that we give to people is that you will take our software, you can put whatever you want into it, and it'll come out the way you want it. So there's a lot of control of how presentation goes. But essentially that's the story about how it works, and particularly for newspapers and things. We also do consolidated press, so the Australian and the Telegraph and those sort of papers. We're also done producing our software. Should be asking if there are any questions, but you can ask me at the end. Okay, so here's our timeline. We started about 1999, various different forms, and in 2002 we established a US company, and that was probably the best thing we ever did. When we started, we said we're born global, and I remember talking to people who were interested in investing money in us at the time, that they said, oh, well, you have a go in Australia, and if you're successful in Australia, then you can take on the world. And we said, no, that's not what we're doing. We're starting worldwide, and then we're coming back, and perhaps we'll sell in Australia. And our mantra was always, we're born global. And to do that, we really needed to have our headquarters in the United States, and certainly in Silicon Valley, as that was really the heart of it all, particularly in those days. And my son, the CEO, he moved to California in 2003, and we've been in Palo Alto ever since. 2014, we merged with a company called Moxicode, who were the producers of Tiny MCE. They had a very large following of developers around the world, and I guess one of the things that they wanted to do was to have the sort of marketing and sales ability that we had, they couldn't provide. But just on that point, when we merged with Moxicode, and still today, we only have one other significant competitor in the world. Only one other. So, and they're based in Holland, which means that they're very touchy when it comes to the Americans. Never mind. Okay, so 2018, steady growth. I can't tell you any financials because we're privately held. That's not what we talk about. But that's certainly gives you a good idea of what Ephox is all about. I think that's it.
So where was Moxicode? Were they a US
They were in
company?
Sweden. They were in Sweden. Yeah, they were in Sweden. So they were the people we had in Umeå in northern Sweden. Just two guys actually. It's grown a bit since then. But they developed this open source code. They couldn't translate that into profit, because that's the real challenge with open source, is how do you make money out of open source? You're giving away everything. You know? I'm trying to think of an analogy. I think it'd be like running trains to Sydney and providing the travel for free but selling coffee on them. So
it kind of happens right now, but they don't give you the coffee.
Yeah, I guess it's about saying, you know, what is the way to get your foot in the door?
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Get your foot in the door, and once you've got your foot in the door, then
it's a very brave business model. I suppose, where did you get in terms of the business model that you were designed back in 2002? Were you looking at somebody else's model at the time? Where did that come from?
No, we started off just selling our software standard. It was sold as a perpetual license. I was sold as a perpetual license, and we had a very, very close relationship with IBM all the way through. So that was good. But then when we looked around, we said, well, the better way to go is just to give it away. And we broadened our base of who we can sell to. So I guess it was just in-house, wasn't in a particular model.
Okay, yeah, it felt right.
It felt right, yeah.
Because you've got such a small team, and it looks like you've had a small team for a long time. It's hard to understand how you could do all this in such a small team. So those would be pretty awesome people. Have they been the same team with you all along? Have you managed to retain the consistency in your team?
Development team, yes.
Yeah.
Development teams are essentially the same as there hasn't been a lot of turnover in that. The areas that have come down in terms of our staffing have been sales. We've tried various different sales models, but essentially everybody comes to us. So computer systems have really helped identify who they are. I mean, Google is our best friend. Right? You know, what we know from people from Google is just amazing. Facebook's got nothing on Google. So, you know, we know who they are and where they're from. We know how to get in touch with them. So. And the salespeople have skills of being able to sort of getting that door to say, well, we know you're using your product, and we know you can use it under open source, but have you thought about it? And occasionally we get people who come to us, particularly large corporations and government, come to us and say, we're just not happy with open source. Open source can have some real problems, particularly these days in relation to, say, privacy. And the Americans are pretty touchy about it not having Russian coded, whatever that might be. But you know, there is an incentive there for large corporations to own their intellectual property rather than to relate to.
Do you see any major threats coming? You know, everything that's happening right now. Like I was reading about in southwest event there in Texas. Is that what they call it? Yeah. They're looking at all this responsibility around the internet and you know, everything that's been happening politically. Is there any threats coming down the line to what it is you do around that space?
Not specifically for us, I don't think. One of the things that's big in the world is called the Europeans GDPR regulations, which start in October, which are fairly onerous on corporations in terms of their storage of data. And we've had a lot of people getting in touch with us and saying, do you record any personal data? And of course the answer to that is no, not really. Well, we've got your email address, and that's actually personal data. So it's a whole new area, there's no question about corporations tightening up on that. So what I suspect is going to happen is that if they're in open source and they say we're concerned about that, we'll get a commercial license from you so that we can say that we've satisfied that particular requirement. And I know quite a few have done that, IBM and Verizon and a few others have been within the last few weeks just to sort that issue out.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Just two questions. First one, you started in '99. What were you doing before you started? What's your background? And then your son's background you mentioned as well.
Okay, well my background was that I'd started off in Federal Public Service many years ago doing an economics degree and got interested in office productivity. So I was quite instrumental in the implementation of things like word processing and the destruction of typing pools and things like that in the federal government. And I'd always had some sort of involvement in this text manipulation area, so I had an interest in it. And after that I'd worked for KPMG and Ernst Young in that sort of office productivity area. So I guess I was keen, you know, when my son did a science degree at UQ, and when he said, you know, this is the area to get into, and I said, yeah, that's the area to get into, because everybody's got to type something, right? That's what computers are all for, they're typing, and that's we went on from there basically.
So you're not a coder by any means or anything. You're at the front end of it, sort of.
I was at the front end of it, although I could do the coding.
Could you? Okay.
Certainly back in the early days, I remember writing an accounting program, but not these days, no. Although it wouldn't be too hard to get back to it, I guess. I just don't want to.
In terms of that timing of when you started, were you affected by the .com bubble at that? Like, so really... did you? What led you to persist when you were just establishing, and then that happened, to move to the US?
Well, I think it slowed our growth down substantially. It certainly meant that we never received any funding. So essentially we've been going nearly 20 years and we've bootstrapped the whole lot. although there are plans eventually to go to IPO. But there's no rush to do that. We're not in any great hurry to do that.
And then in terms of, just going back to Fiona's question earlier about, so you decided to go open source from the beginning, did you always have in the back of your mind that you would be using the add-ons as a way of generating revenue and
Yes,
knowing
yes.
exactly what those add-ons would sort of look like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
So were you offering those from the beginning then as well? So you had the open source, but you always had those add-ons available?
No.
Right.
The first thing about open source was to offer technical support. Right. So if you got a commercial license, you got technical support. So that means that unless you had a really hotshot programmer, coder, they could come to us and they could get assistance in integrating it into their product. And a lot of people needed to do that, particularly larger organisations. You know, there are a lot of developers out there that probably could have done it themselves, but the big companies, they need that. Then we developed the add-ons. And they largely came about from customer requests. So we'd have a customer and they'd say, you know, here we are, we'd like to do power pasting. So they said, we do an arrangement, well, you pay for most of it. And they did, and we went to commercial product. And the one with the in-context checking, again, IBM, I think, have come forward and said, you know, we'd like to integrate that. Can we work with you to integrate it? So often it's been a relationship with the developer.
Do you outsource any part of the business, you know, the technical support? You have a lot of developers out there using your tools. Do you outsource any part of your business? Technical support?
No, we did it once. We actually tried doing technical support in India, would you believe? And went on for a year or so. That wasn't terribly successful. And these days, technical support is coordinated from Denver in Colorado, and he'll ship around the requests to either Brisbane or to Sweden. And there's also a guy in Palo Alto who does some technical support as well.
So they're a part of your core team?
Yeah.
Is the positioning Brisbane and Sweden or Queensland and Australia? Is that to do with the time zones? Obviously, Moxico had something to do with the Sweden location.
No, we found it in Brisbane. We found it in Brisbane.
Yeah, but in terms of your structure at the moment,
We're still there, they've moved out.
yeah, but is that, you were talking about technical support, so obviously a different time zone in Australia to what you're in Sweden and vice versa. Is it driven by that or?
Interesting one, actually. And it happens nearly every time we negotiate a big contract, is that they'll say we want 24-hour, 7-day-a-week technical support. And we always say, no, we only offer technical support during business hours in Queensland and Sweden, no, and California. Business hours in Brisbane and California are not public holidays. Take it or leave it. And everybody has taken it. You know, it's...
But over those two time zones, you pretty much covered, right?
It's not too bad.
Yeah.
And most of our customers are either in the United States or elsewhere, I guess. But, and we have a computer system that handles all of that. And I suppose it's the same with a lot of what we do. We've got some pretty extensive computer systems to back us up in terms of more technical support or even marketing, sales, you know, that's the keeping track of people. All of that sort of stuff is in some sense, it's been a trade-off of staff to get those systems going. And that's, I think that's a real success. Part of the success is to have those good systems to do it. But certainly in terms of what we've found is, apropos the whole issue of technical support, it's just a bit tough. You don't have to do 7 days a week, 24 hours for support. People don't work that way anyway. They say there's an emergency, you know, I don't know how many times people have come to me and said, look, I want a contract that guarantees them support within 24 minutes, basically. And I said, no, it's just not going to happen, right? Go back and think about it. So that's what's happened.
But do you think a part of that is the position you hold where, you know, so much of the content that's being created online is using your product? I mean, you're really almost a monopoly in that regard, that you are in a position to be able to say, yeah, no, we're only going to do support hours when we say we want to do them?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I think that's probably pretty much it, isn't it? You know, that you haven't got a lot of alternatives. Perhaps the point is that they've already been using our software for many years, right? And the cost of moving to someone else is quite horrendous.
So, speaking about the basically monopoly or the duopoly, the guy did, was it Poll? Did you say? How do you maintain that? I mean, with all the tech companies out there, you would think you would just be absolutely knocked down with competition. It's just amazing. It's just.
Well, that's what everybody says.
Yeah,
and I guess it's the biggest risk, isn't it? Somebody could do it, but they haven't.
That's
But IBM haven't done it. IBM have had all their resources. They haven't done it. We don't have competition from Google. Google have Google Docs, but they've never done this sort of thing.
That's amazing.
Quite often we'll have somebody saying, oh, we're going to end the contract. We're not going to subscribe this year because we're going to develop our own in-house system. And the contract comes up for renewal. They haven't bothered. Why would you bother?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do 96 different languages and you can't do all of the other things that we provide.
I wasn't thinking from someone doing it themselves, but like another company doing, you know, basically what you're doing, offering, you know, something else with some other shiny thing someone can chase.
Well, I think it's a foot in the door problem. How do you get to the foot in the door?
Yeah, there's some pretty good companies out there. I think that's you got to wear that as a badge of honor. Really, that's just amazing.
Timing.
Honestly.
Timing's so important, isn't it?
That's right.
And do you think luck as well has
Timing and luck,
played a...
yeah.
I mean, like, I think that certainly the Moxico people, UniQuest, built up a huge following in the developer community. And they've always been very responsive to developers wanting changes and things like that.
Yeah, and
it's part of this customer relationship, isn't it?
Yeah,
Developer relationship.
Yeah, that's it. And there's more and more and more developers. Oh well, actually, there's less and less developers. We need more and more. So that's the opposite. Yeah, so it's not. It's only going to. So where do you see the future bringing you? Where do you see this business being in, let's say, 5 years or 10 years time? If you look into the future of what's happening in the world with AI and everything else around that, what other components are you developing to fit into that?
Well, certainly the in-context checking is a big area.
That's so strange. That's so weird. I never even would have considered that. And that could be. I need to think about that a bit. I'm just imagining where that could be go kind of badly wrong for the user. But from your perspective,
well, you know, it means that all of the theirs are spelt right, and it's got the right comma in the right place. It's a lot more sophisticated than that, but it's about tone, and it's about if you're writing a letter to somebody, or you're writing an academic article, that you're meeting all of those requirements.
you're matching your market.
You're matching your market.
So there must be,
But are you using machine learning for that?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's going to be so helpful.
Got a question at the back there.
Yeah, g'day Bill. Sorry for coming in late, mate.
All right.
I missed your start and while we're rehashing old information, but when you were establishing and you know, did you need to look for capital, and if so, how did you gain that, and or was it self-funded? Yeah.
We had a couple of people at the beginning who put some money in, right at the very beginning, and I guess we were always open to more money ever since that point in time. And we'd had a number of discussions with venture capitalists and things like that. But nobody would see this particular area as sexy, unfortunately. It's not a consumer product.
No. So how did you drive it? Because I mean, it's similar boat.
We've just bootstrapped it.
Yeah, bootstrapped it.
Bootstrapped it all the way through. That's a good income, but still. And you know, I think the future is that shortly we'll be in a position to do some really significant growth, probably an IPO.
Awesome.
But the product's probably not going to change all that much. Textbox.io is a growth product for us. It'll eventually merge with TinyMCE as a high-end editor product. we'll just continue to grow those, basically. And the ancillary things that go with it, like uploads, handling the photos and context, link checking. You know, it's a pretty good need out there for that.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with your son and having a family business? How does that work? Or how have you found that to work? Are there any kind of pros and cons that you would advise people who are looking
I actually haven't been in the office.
So a bit of distance helps.
Yeah, a bit of distance helps, I think. And I've tried to have a job that didn't cross over what he was doing. So I've looked after mostly the sort of originally the accounting, and but these days it's mainly the legals. So there's quite a bit of that, and contracts, and all of the contracts, and anything that's right. So we get on very, very well, but I think distance has been a great advantage.
So what's your management structure at the moment, essentially?
Well, we have my son Andrew is CEO, he's in Palo Alto. We have the Chief Operating Officer. He looks after development, and he's located in Austin, Texas. Though under him he has a manager of the director of the operations in Sweden and Brisbane. We have a Chief Financial Officer, and she's in Palo Alto. And we have I guess it's a vacant position for the Chief Sales Marketing guy who's recently left us. But in Palo Alto we have marketing and sales and administration accounting. And it's very handy having being a US company like that.
And do you how do you make your major strategic decisions? Do you have like a board?
Yeah, there's a board. Yeah. And we've been lucky to be able to get good people from Silicon Valley to be on our board. Yeah. So that's been a key player. We've got some guys there who from been in the internet game for a long time, and in venture capital for that matter. So that's always been our aim is to do that.
Did you acquire those board members over time after having established the US company?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, that was important to at one stage of the game to get the right board members.
And has there been much movement on the board, or?
Not a lot at all. No, not the board at all.
No, it's quiet business. It sounds very quiet, you know, like lots of stuff is happening, but it's quiet all behind the scenes. And talking about that, you know, I'm sure, but you know, from my perspective, it seems like it's all settled and well established. People are staying a long time. Small team, global team. Can you tell me a little bit about your company culture, the culture that impact, or how you impact that team to stick together so well, and how you communicate across all these different countries and cultures, and how that's
well, that's a bit of a challenge at times.
Yeah.
I think we've had regular get-togethers and tried to have a culture of innovation and encourage people to be innovative. And what we're looking for is people who are probably at the edge of their game in terms of being coders. And we've offered them really something exciting. Perhaps that's the secret. You know, this is not about maintaining a legacy rate system for the council. This is about something quite exciting at the end of it, a different application.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences in innovation and how, like the different countries that you operate in, how innovation is different between those different cultures, and what's good and bad about each one?
Well, I suppose that in the case of Queensland, we've had to be specific, very specific in picking people, because I think a lot of IT people, in my own views entirely, produced by universities in Queensland are for government. legacy systems. So getting somebody who's innovative and really keen to make a mark has been what we've aimed to do. And these people tend to be quite different. The geeks and the real sense of the word. But it's a challenge. I was talking before that probably half our staff in Queensland would be from offshore. They've either walked in. I don't think we've actually recruited anybody from offshore. The vast majority have walked in saying we want to work for you. So there's been quite a bit of that.
What do you think we need to do in Australia to sort of encourage that sort of innovation mindset a bit better?
Yeah, let's see.
Have a recession.
The $64,000 question.
A bit long.
I suppose it really comes down to being an entrepreneur in the sense that you're prepared to take a risk, that you're prepared to do something that's going to be different, right? That you're not going to be sitting in front of a computer just doing a legacy system. You're going to work on something that could make a difference somewhere, and you're going to take a risk. This is all about risk at the end of the day, isn't it? Because that's what entrepreneurship's about. It's about taking a risk and being rewarded. And I guess that's one of the things that we need to drive in our schools, and probably through organisations like this, is simply that life's not all about being a smooth path. It's going to have challenges, and you're going to have to take risks to succeed. So you can be an entrepreneur in anything, selling lemonade on the street, for example. But that's what we want in our people.
So with your business model, how do you structure that so they get rewarded for that entrepreneurship? Like if you say, how do they?
Well, we pay them quite well.
That doesn't generally necessarily mean that you're going to be innovative just because of more money. Sometimes
No.
If that goes in reverse, if it's just like just on salary package or whatever.
Well, they would get rewarded. There's bonuses and things like that.
So it's that simple.
We've always given people opportunity to travel. They wanted to do that. For people like Sweden, the Swedes are they're just geeks. They get a buzz out of it. It hasn't been something where we've needed to follow a real Apple type or Google type model of having offices with the right sort of windows or coffee machines or free coke, although we do all of that. It's not been a big driver, I don't think.
I don't think that's a big enough incentive anyway for people in the long term. I think money is a good incentive and being paid really well, but also flexibility. And I like what you say about travel. I think that's giving somebody an opportunity if they do want to move, that they don't lose their job, that they can take it with them. But that's a developer, they can do it.
They can do that. It's true. And we've always been quite flexible on working from home. And in fact, that's an area that's really going to grow with us, is that we will move a lot more into people working from home. We've had currently in our Palo Alto office, it's very difficult to find anybody in the office simply because of the requirements of commuting. You've got to take the dog to the vet or whatever. And the trip literally from San Jose up to Palo Alto is an hour and a half.
Newcastle. Yeah.
So why not just work people from home and have some sort of common co-working space where you can get together perhaps a couple of days a week, but only do it between say 10 and 2, so you're not involved in the commute. Or the model you could use here is you go to Sydney every now and again for these sort of meetings. So I think when I read what's happening in the US, that's going to be a really growing model. People like Apple and Google are suddenly going to realise this is pretty stupid what we've done.
Bring everybody to one place at 9 and...
Absolutely. Just incredible when you go to Mountain View and you see all of the people arriving. 150 buses they have at the run, which arrive at their campus.
But there's no amount of money that would make us sit in traffic, so I think that's really important.
That's right. And Apple's the same. They've got this huge campus down in Cupertino, and they've got no public transport. It's just ridiculous. People are going to have to drive to work, and they're going to be in the commute. And mind you, there are some really nice things that are happening. And I had one of these cars when I was in the United States, with the adaptive cruise control, right? So you get in the middle lane and you put the cruise control on 65 or whatever the speed limit is, and you just got to steer it. And some of the cars these days you don't even have to steer. So that's probably the answer, but you can't do any work. That's the train.
How do you manage communicating between, like you were saying that you don't have lots of people going into the office at once, so how do you manage the communication and all the work that needs to be done?
Slack's pretty important. I noticed that's on your system. That's probably number one, actually. That's really, really important. People would chat a lot on Slack. And of course email. We'd have regular meetings, video meetings, which would be GoToMeeting. But Slack's really quite a really important part of our business.
Do you find it challenging to maintain culture when you're not actually physically seeing all the people that you're working with all the time, like company culture?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's always a challenge. We've had, every few years we get together. Last time we got together in Hawaii, and try to develop a culture that way. Keep it going. But it's always a challenge. It takes a lot of work. There's no question about that. And my son Andrew spends a lot of time flying between various places to talk to people. So that's a big part of it. In fact, my son-in-law, he works for a company that produces microchips for cars, and he's senior manager, and he has to try to maintain the culture between Japan and Germany and the United States and Taiwan. And that's a bigger challenge that we've had to do, I can assure you.
Well, you mentioned being a US-based company had its benefits.
Yeah.
I'm interested to understand why.
Okay. That was one of our first decisions, was to set up in the United States, and certainly selling to the US government is an essential. You cannot sell to the US government if you're not an American company, and also to people like IBM and other big companies that we've dealt with over the years. They really want to know that you are American. There's some benefit to them. Don't mind if you have a development centre in Brisbane, but they want to be able to say you're there. And there's a lot of legal reasons for that too, particularly intellectual property and all that sort of stuff. It's very complicated. All sorts of little things are important. Like I have to be a US citizen, for example.
Right.
I can't do my job without being a US citizen.
Yeah, right.
So those are the sorts of things that you... And of course, getting people into the United States is always a challenge.
Yes.
Is into Australia. And there have been some various routes to do that. And we've had a lot of help from people like Austrade and so on the way. It's always been very good. There's a good relationship with them.
So you're listed on New York, were you?
I've got no idea.
Oh, okay.
It's not up to me.
Right.
I'm sure somebody will eventually work that out, if they ever did.
Right.
If they ever did. And it's probably within 5 years rather than immediately. But we're not like Atlassian. We rush out and take over the world. Although Atlassian are a customer of ours.
Is the capital raise idea centred around a big strategic project that's coming up?
No.
Bill, you mentioned with open source, and I've heard of, and I'm not a IT person, I qualify these comments. I've heard of other developers that have gone down the open source path. That, one of the benefits to them has been, again, I may not have the terminology right, but people that sort of develop plugins to their open source, they use that as a base, that the base company benefits from the success of the people that are developing, these bits that add on to the base technology.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything specific.
But in your case, no?
No.
No, okay.
No, of any that are, presumably there are out there.
Yeah, I've
We've
heard of
been
it.
our own if that's the way we prefer to go.
Yeah. Context I've heard it in is in a discovery in you've heard of discovery in legal documents. This is artificial intelligence that is a development from that process. Their product is open source, but there's a lot of niche markets that spin off that. And so their success has been reinforced by these sort of plug-in type specialists.
Well, we do actually have quite a number of users who are using our software in that sort of context.
Right.
So if they're quite a number of the big legal publishers use our software, probably in that sort of environment.
I might take that as a cue to wrap up. Thank you so much, Bill, for your talk. That was